I've not shown this guitar before on the channel. You probably haven't seen it. Oh, you definitely haven't seen it. This is a Squier Stratocaster guitar by Fender guitar company. You've probably heard of. The reason you won't have seen it is that this normally lives in a cupboard in one of my group teaching bases away from this location, so it's not normally on display or in use here. The reason I'm going to do a little video on it today is, started off as a restringing job. I decided to change the strings on it. In the process of doing that, I noticed I needed to do a little repair on it, so I'm going to just run through what's gone wrong and what needs repairing. It's only a simple job, but I've decided to make a slight minor improvement to the guitar in the process of doing that. The guitar itself's been great. I've had this for about 15 or 16 months now, and I use it with students on a weekly basis, so I won't say it gets beaten up, but it does get knocked and banged a little bit, you know, so brand new students who aren't used to handling a guitar might turn around and clunk it into something or put it down, you know, in the wrong way, that type of thing. So that's the reason I bought a cheap guitar for that. It's never let me down. It sounds great, it plays great, it's been set up nicely by the shop when I bought it, so all that side of things fine. So I've got to change the strings. If you can see clearly, if you've got eagle eyes, you might notice there is no strings on the guitar at the minute, so I've took the strings off. In the process of doing that, I noticed that on the tuning heads, on the headstock of the guitar, a couple of the tuning heads felt a little bit loose, like they weren't quite tightened up on these nuts. These little nuts on the front of the capstans, they hold the things in place, and they shouldn't be rattling around. They should be secured to the headstock. So I noticed a couple of those were loose. One of those I tried tightening up and it wouldn't tighten up at all, so I removed the mechanism and I found inside of it that it actually snapped off inside. There seemed to be three tiny little, what looked like minuscule tack welds holding the thing together, and that had just gone. So there was no way of tightening this back up onto the guitar, so that obviously needed a replacement tuning peg. Now the other one that was loose, it hadn't snapped, but when I tried to tighten it up, as soon as I applied any pressure whatsoever to it, it snapped. I snapped it. Okay, I put my hand up, I snapped it, I broke it. But literally, I've done these before. I was being careful. You don't swing off these to tighten them. You just nip them up a little bit. That's all it needs. You don't need a big wrench or a spanner. I used literally a socket, if you're familiar with automotive tools, in my fingers. I didn't have any attachment on it. It was just fingers to tighten it. That's all it needs. But that one snapped as well. So I thought to myself, perhaps that's a weak point. Maybe it's a little design fault on these particular items on the guitar. Now, when you buy a budget range guitar, as this is one of the cheaper ones of the Squier range, this is typical of one of the areas where they cut corners to save money, because you'd never normally notice that or see it when you look at the guitar in a guitar shop or under normal use. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's had a whack or something when one of the students have been using it, I don't know. But it seems the fact that two of them are broken, perhaps they're a weak point. So rather than just replace those two, what I've decided to do was get a complete set of new tuning pegs to fit onto this guitar of a slightly higher quality. These are by the TGI brand. I've got all the TGI products in my collection of stuff. They aren't the best ones you can buy, they aren't the worst ones you can buy, but they are a step up, I feel, from what's fitted to the guitar as standard. So rather than just being a re-stringing and obviously check the tuning intonation whilst I'm doing it, it's become a replace the machine heads job on the guitar. What I'll try and do is, once I get these off in a moment or two, I'll show you the offending article, if I can show it clearly on the camera, where it snapped, and you can see what the problem is. So here's my tuning peg. Now what we're looking at is you can see obviously the winder on the tuning peg. This section feeds through from the back of the headstock through to the front, and the actual peg where you put your string through, that's obviously on the front of your headstock. Now once you've pushed that through, the other section of it goes down on top, and that's where I was tightening down to secure it to the headstock. Now, just take that off again. The way that attaches, this barrel here, that's threaded on the inside, so when I screw down this other section, hopefully you can see that's also threaded. Get my sausage fingers out of the way. those threads obviously screw together, and that's what holds the thing in place. There's also, if you can see it, there's also a little protrusion there, and that seats into a hole that's on the back of the headstock, and that stops the whole thing from rotating around. And that's the reason why you don't need to tighten these things down too tight. It's not the tightness of the screwing the nut down that holds these from sliding around. It's that little lug that locates in the hole. So if you can see this bit, can't move it around, this barrel bit has come away from the body assembly, so it just spins freely. So when I'm trying to tighten down the nut that goes in from the front, it won't tighten down because it's just spinning on itself. And I can see there's three little, looks like tiny little welds on there that have come away, so that's never going to work again. So that's rubbish. The new tuner, that's the new peg I've got, very similar, exactly the same principle. It's got that barrel on. Just had a quick look at it, I can already see that seems like it's much more securely attached. It looks like it's attached all the way around. I'm not sure if welding's the right term for it, might be brazed or something like that, but it's certainly not as flimsy as the old one, so that's going to be good. The only thing that I've got with this is it doesn't have the little lug on that's going to locate in the hole on the headstock. I knew this when I was buying it because I have done these before. Instead of the little lug, this has got a separate little boss coming off with a hole in for a screw that secures it. The screws are supplied in the set. The only challenge is that screw hole doesn't line up with the hole that's already on the guitar, so what I'm going to have to do is drill another tiny little hole to accommodate the screws for mounting these onto the guitar headstock. I'll see if I can show you that when I do it, but that's just something to be aware of, that they don't line up. So I'm just going to have to do a little bit of craftsmanship on there. You probably could, if you were desperate, try and force the screw in by yourself with a screwdriver, but I always tend to like to drill a tiny little pilot hole just to give the screw a nice little start, stop any chance of the wood splitting, and make sure the screw goes in nice and straight. But obviously if you don't have a drill, your best bet is to try and borrow one, but you do need a tiny little drill bit. You don't want one that's the size of a screw, otherwise the screw won't seat properly. I'll see if I can show you that when I get around to putting these on. So that's the new one. As you can see, I've been putting the tuners onto the headstock of the guitar. I've done 4 of them already, so I'll just quickly run you through the process. It's dead simple, but just for sake of completion, the main body of the thing goes through from the back, through the big hole there. Able to see the shaft of it coming through. Then we get the front section, there's a little washer, and then the barrel. That's just going to thread over that. I'll do it this way because I'm right-handed. Just going to tighten that up against the headstock of the guitar to keep the thing from falling off and moving. Now, once I've run that nut down to tighten it up, this is when I'm going to use my socket just to put a bit of extra tightening on that I can't do with my fingers. So these are 10mm nuts. I've got a little 10mm socket here that matches the nuts. I mentioned before, I don't have any ratchet or extension bar on this. I'm literally just using the socket just to turn it in. I don't want any more force than that because then I'm at risk of damaging the components. So I'm just going to nip it up a little bit just to begin with, and then I'm going to have a look just to make sure that it's sitting straight as I wish it to be before I tighten it up any further. If necessary, just move it around, twist it, and make a little adjustment. Worth keeping a hold onto the peg whilst you do the final tightening on this to stop it spinning round. It might want to spin round as you tighten it. And again, just with my fingers, I'm just going to, a little bit of element of feel in this, as with a lot of hand tools, but that's about as tight as I can get it with this socket, and that's fine. I don't want it any tighter, so I'm not going to use any attachments. So that's done. To be honest with you, that I know now is going to be tight enough that the screw probably isn't even going to be needed. But just for the sake of completing the demonstration, you can see a little hole there at the back. That's where the screw is going to go through and into the actual headstock of the guitar. So this is where I'm going to do a little pre-drilling, what we call a little pilot hole into the guitar. The main reason for this is to get the screw to seat nicely. They are self-tapping screws to a degree. In theory, you could drive them in with force with a screwdriver. I don't want to do that because with little screws like that there's a chance they could snap, or the head of the screw could break off, or when you're trying to pressure it in you might not get it in straight and square, which is what you're aiming for. So I'm just going to, if you can see the size of the drill bit, it's absolutely tiny that I'm using. It certainly doesn't want to be any bigger than the screw, it wants to be ever so slightly smaller than the screw, so there's still a little bit of wood left for the threads to go. And I'm not going to go the full length of the screw, I'm going to stop a little bit short so that the screw can just finish off by cutting its own threads. So just going to get my drill in there, just going to look at it, make sure we're as straight as we can be, horizontal and vertical, and then I'm just going to, because I've done the other ones, I know roughly how far I'm going, which is about there, a little bit more. So I've drilled my little hole for my screw, tiny little screw that's going to go in there. As I say, it's probably not needed, but we'll put it in anyway because we've got a hole for it now. Magnetic screwdriver is always a useful thing. Not perfect because screws aren't that brilliant quality metal, but it'll help us just to be able to hopefully, if we can locate that into there. I'm just using my thumb just to guide it in straightly, just as we get started off with, and then just nice and easily I'm going to start working the screw into the hole. I'll put a little bit of pressure with my hand on the back of the screwdriver. As always, I'd recommend having reasonably decent quality tools to be working with. You don't want ones that are blunt because they'll probably damage the screws, and a screwdriver of that style with a rounded end on enables me to just put a little bit of palm pressure in there to help drive the screw in. I'm not trying to push it through, I'm just keeping a little bit of pressure on it whilst I'm winding it in progressively. I'm not yanking it like that, I'm just winding it in gradual motions. When it seats, you'll feel it gets just a slightly tighter and doesn't want to go any further, then you stop. If you carry on, that's when you're going to snap the head off the screw. So the screw's nicely seated in now. That's as tight as I want it on the front. The screw's nicely in on the back. I'm just going to finish off the final tuning peg on this guitar, and then I'm back to where I want it to be in terms of doing the string swap and the obviously tune it up, then the intonation on it, and then we're good to go for the students next week. So a little quick repair job and slight improvement to the guitar because we put slightly better quality tuning pegs on than what were there originally. You can go to town on these, and there's some really expensive ones out there in the market that include locking mechanisms that hold your string to stop you having tuning stability problems, but that's another topic entirely. The only upgrade that this is a quality upgrade, because the other ones were frankly nasty bits of Chinese chocolate that were fit for nothing. But we've got rid of those now, so going forward we shouldn't have the same problem and be able to enjoy the instrument.